Cool. All right. My name is Hugo Bernier. I work at Takeda Pharmaceutical with Chris, and I'm a AI wrangler. I think that's my role at Takeda. Um, Session today is supposed to be about building SPFx solutions with AI. Now, I want to make it clear this title might be a little misleading. I'm not going to show you how to use AI to build SPFx solutions. I'm going to show you how you can use AI within your SPFx solutions, and probably more generally into any of your applications, to introduce delight for your users and to make your users love your applications. I work again at Takeda, where it's a pharmaceutical company. We're literally working on large problems like solving, curing cancer and solving world hunger with AI. But you don't have to always rely on just solving a big problem with AI. There's some really cool things that we can do. And let me show you what I mean. All right. So this web part that I'm going to demo, I have to admit, I'm very selfish. The web part I'm going to demo, I built it 6 years ago. And it's a series of web parts that I will talk to you about. But I never really, I put them in GitHub, but I never shared them as part of the PnP repository. I will be fixing that after this call. But just to show you that the web part we're going to be talking about today is actually not a fancy new web part. It's a web part that we've just kind of refactored a little bit and added AI to make it more betterer. I should also point out that, as always, I have my fancy Bork extension that replaces the fork button on GitHub, and it makes me happy every time I see it. All right, so the web parts that we are talking about, there's a series of web parts in that sample. One is a web part that allows you to do a flowchart by just typing simple markdown-like syntax. Another one allows you to build a sequence diagram using the same approach here, using a simple markdown syntax. And finally, the one that we'll be focusing on today is one that uses Mermaid to actually allow you to create any kind of diagram. And Mermaid is something that uses Markdown as well to create really cool, configurable, and sometimes interactive diagrams. Now, if you don't know about Mermaid, Mermaid is a library that is available for free. They do have some paid services as well, but it creates a whole bunch of different types of diagrams. It's open source. It's client-side only, so that means it's a JavaScript library that runs in your browser and generates an SVG rendering of diagrams based on the syntax you provide. Let me demo what we're going to be talking about today. There you go. All right. So if I go to Mermaid, and again, you can see how many different types of diagrams there are. But if I go into Mermaid and I show you some examples here, this is very dynamic. So if I just update the content, it will automatically update the content on the right. Here's some sample charts that are available. And as you can see, the syntax is maybe not the most intuitive, but it's pretty straightforward. You can look at the content and like markdown content, you can kind of make sense of what it is without having to understand SVG syntax or things like that. There are all sorts of different diagrams that you can build. I'm not going to go through every single one. But what I wanted was a mechanism to be able to share within my team anytime that I had a diagram I needed to show, or stats or things like that, and I was too lazy to actually create an image or a Visio diagram or something like that. So this is a live demo, by the way. So these demo gods be with me. So this is the web part, Mermaid web part that we drop in. And the cool thing about the web part is that I can just change the syntax here. In fact, I'm going to go, because I'm lazy, I'm going to go copy and paste some fancy diagrams here. Do-do-do. Here, let's paste this in and see what happens. Ooh, fancy. Let's pick up a mind map here that I'm copying directly from the Mermaid website and show you that I can generate mind maps. Let's just do maybe one more. Ooh, my favorite. I'll show you the Sankey, which allows you to show kind of where things are going back and forth. Now, the full demo of this has some cool features, like the ability to edit the title, to be able to put it in full bleed, so you can put the web part across the page, as well as theme awareness and things like that. But that's not what today's demo is about. And by the way, this is the web part when it's hosted inside of a page, right? You can just have content in here. The demo today is about what I wanted to do with this. Because again, as I said, yeah, it's really cool. I can generate markdown diagrams, but I'm not always too familiar with the syntax. So what I did is I, first of all, I created this custom Monaco editor. So it's Visual Studio Code that is running in the browser, and it has custom syntax that recognizes what content we're looking at. Let me go get another. We'll get a pie chart for fun. There you go. All right. So I gave the opportunity here for you to be able to update and visualize what you're typing in here. But this is where the challenge comes in. How do I use AI to make people's lives a lot easier? Because I don't want people to have to learn the Mermaid syntax or any other syntaxes that we've discussed. And the other,
Hugo,
yes,
you can make all of our lives a little easier by zooming your screen a little.
Zooming my screen.
Zoom it.
I could do that.
All right,
I could do that. Oh, how did it go to?
Wow!
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Thank you. So here's what I did. And the one thing I want to make clear is AI doesn't always have to be a chat interface. For this demo, I am absolutely using a chat interface because I want to be able to do some quick demos here. But instead of having to learn the syntax for, let's say, creating a mind map, what if I said, I don't know, generate a mind map about the solar system. And if the demo gods are with me, what should happen? And this is a big if. There you go. I get a mind map that's automatically generated. Now, it's still dynamic. I can update it, right? But because I also use the context information, which I'll be showing you shortly, I'm able to actually continue asking questions about the same diagram. So add satellites to just add satellites. And if I could spell, I would spell my satellites properly, but sadly, I cannot spell. And let's see if, there you go, it added satellites to my mind map. Now, the cool thing about that is, I can just save it, and I didn't have to learn how to write the mind map syntax. Just another quick demo here to show that this is not hard-coded. Let's say generate a flow diagram of the FDA drug approval process. And this is where we need the cool wait music, David. There you go. So now I got a diagram that got this. Now, how did it get this information is really what I want to talk to you about. So let's go back to them slides. Okay. So the first thing that I'm doing behind the scenes is I am using, for AI, I am using the brand spanking new Azure OpenAI Responses API. It's a really cool API that simplifies how to call AI within Azure. There's also a OpenAI version of it, which was kind of the original version. That's actually what I'm using in today's demo, but both can be used pretty much interchangeably. Why would I use responses? Well, the one thing that responses does over some previous APIs is that it is designed to be future-proof. It is designed to grow. And in fact, the previous versions of the Assistance API is targeted to be deprecated in 2026. It's a simpler mental model is what I meant to say here. You'll see that instead of having to deal with various entities, I can actually just deal with responses. It has built-in tools. So things like the ability to search the internet, call MCP servers, generate images and things like that are built in into the model. And then I can use it across the various modalities. So that means if I wanted to use a real-time voice interface to communicate, or if I wanted to share a picture, upload a picture and say, hey, can you look at this picture and generate a diagram from this? I could do that without having to write too much more code. The structured type safe output is also important. You'll see why shortly. And then the ability to actually send the data in a way that I can say, based on my governance policies within my organization, maybe I don't want the AI provider to store the data I just uploaded, right? Maybe I just want it to be analyzed and then disposed of. That's one of the reasons why you would want to use Responses API. So before, with the Assistance API, you'd use assistants, threads, messages, and runs. But with the new fancy responses, you really deal with one thing, which is responses. So here's a basic request that I would send with responses, right? I would pass the model that I want to use, and then I would give it an input, some text that says, this is what I want you to use. And it will give me a rather lengthy response. But let's just kind of drill through. The first thing it'll give me is kind of an ID that I can refer to later. It'll tell me whether it was completed or not, right? Because sometimes we might have errors or things like that. It'll allow me to call the response in the background. So I actually don't have to wait for it. And this is really useful for large requests or large reasoning, deep research requests where maybe you don't want your computer to freeze while you're waiting for the response to come back. We're not doing that today. And then it gives me an output. And in the output, it gives me different components. In this case, it's saying, I have a message for you. And the message contains this text. Now, here's the problem. The text actually includes both the response that the agent or the assistant is giving me in the window, but it's also given me the Mermaid content in one big, ugly text. We'll have to fix that. And then the role of every message is telling us whether this came from the assistant or from the user, which is you. Why would you want to have different messages with different roles? Maybe I don't want to, maybe I want to inject the previous conversation into this new conversation. So maybe what I want to do is I want to inject multiple messages where I say, this is what I said, then this is what you said, this is what I said, and so on and so forth. All right, let's move on quickly. By default, the text that is returned is in the text format, which is what you saw earlier, but we'll be playing with that soon enough. And then you have the ability to create or use tools to actually help you with getting the results. Now, the secret to actually using AI to get the right answers is to provide context. And what do we mean by context? Well, imagine if I gave you a job, you just got hired for your first day, and I give you a job, but I didn't explain to you what your job is, what you're expected to do. I just said, go do your job. It probably wouldn't work so well. And that's where context comes in with AI, is that you want to tell it, where it is, what it's doing, what you expect from it, and so on and so forth. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back from my tools. Let's go back to the request here. One of the first things that I did is I got an ID. When I got the response, let's remember this for later, because here's what happens if I sent a new request and I just said, hey, can you include the timeline information, without telling it that I'm referring to the previous message. It probably would respond something like, huh? It doesn't know. There's no context in your message. And this is why when you send a message that is part of a continued conversation, there's two things you can do. One is to pass it the previous response ID, so it will know that this is a follow-up question. Or two is you could send the entire content of your conversation back and forth every single time. I'm the world's laziest developer, so I prefer to send the previous response ID, but there could be reasons why you don't want, again, the conversation to be stored on OpenAI or Azure. And so this is the same ID that I used before. Now, the other thing that you can do with context is to tell it what you expect from it. In this case, I'm passing instructions that are saying, you're a helpful assistant that helps generating Mermaid syntax. That's pretty good, but the one thing you have to understand is the AI model doesn't know the context of where you are. So if the user asks a question about the diagram that's currently on the screen, it expects the model to know that it's currently in a property pane inside of a SharePoint web part, and it's showing a diagram and things like that. So you might want to include something, and this is just for example, but you might want to include something like, hey, you're a helpful assistant, and when you produce Mermaid content blocks, I will display them. It's going to be an SVG diagram, it's going to be on the left of the screen, and so on and so forth. That way, when the user interacts with the agent, and it says, hey, can you fix the thing, on the left here or whatever, it understands based on the context I've provided. All right, moving quickly here. Now, the other thing that could happen is that if you think about how LLMs are built, they tend to have, zoom in here, they tend to have kind of a cutoff date, right? They've been trained by a certain date. GPT-4 started with September 2021. GPT-5 was trained until June 2024. Now, the problem is if Mermaid continues to change its syntax, and it does, it constantly add new diagram types and things like that, my code is not going to work. And this is a good example of this. I asked it to do something. It went and looked at its training as of whatever 2021 it was, and it said, oh, in 2021, the flowchart syntax for Mermaid looked like this. But in 2025, the syntax has changed. So how do I do that? How do I take care of things like that? Well, one of the techniques that you can use is something called grounding, where you're able to actually tell your LLM that there's information that you are in control of that it can use to make its decisions and base its answers on. Now, here's the problem. I could probably say, well, okay, I'm going to go to Mermaid, and I'm going to insert every single documentation for every single diagram type. But you saw how many diagram types there are. If I included every page on this website to help teach or ground my assistant, it probably, it would cost you a lot of money because it has to parse through that content at all times. Now, the other thing I could do, if let's say I wanted, instead of using Mermaid syntax, I wanted to use policies that we've built within an organization or things like that, you might want to store these documents in a vector database where it's easily accessible and use something called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, right? It's a pattern that allows you to go store documents that you want to be searched and then ground your assistant based on that content. But the problem is, I personally don't want to have to go take a copy of the Mermaid documentation every single time that Mermaid updates the documentation. It's just not something that I'm in charge of. It's not something I'm in control of. So I would rather do something that's a bit more dynamic. This is where tools come in. Tools is the ability to say, hey, Mr. LLM, when you need this information, you let me know. I'm going to go get the information for you, and I'm going to execute some code, and I'm going to give you the answer you need. So an example of using a tool is to actually say, and this is the typical example that's always used, right? Having a function called weather. So here's the tools, and then the function here is get the current weather. And maybe it calls, it's a function that gets executed on the client. So inside of your web part, for example, and you give it a name, you describe it so that your LLM knows when to call it and what to do with it. And then you describe the parameters you want your function to receive, or the function's expecting. In this case, we're expecting a location, we're expecting a unit, and it's going to be one of Celsius or Fahrenheit. And then you say, anytime you want to call this function, I'm always going to need location and unit. And you can also say, hey, call this function whenever you believe you need to do that. So this is a great way, instead of like, because one thing I could have done is I could have said, well, I'm going to parse the question that the user has sent, and I'm going to look for a keyword like mind map, flowchart, or something like that. And then I'm going to inject that documentation when I send the message. But the AI is already doing a good job at parsing the information. It is doing a great job at extrapolating and being able to tell me, hey, the user is really asking for a sequence diagram here, or a tree chart. So why would I parse this myself when I can get the AI to do it for me? And then when the AI needs it, I can get it to call my function. So in this example, I built a function that goes and gets the Mermaid documentation based on the diagram that you're looking for. So, and what I do is I go get the official diagram, Mermaid documentation, when you tell me what kind of diagram you're looking for. So, for example, here, this is the kind I want the kind like flowchart, graph, sequence diagram, and so on and so forth. And I tell it that you always need to give me the kind of diagram that's coming in. Now, there's one more thing that we need to think about. In this particular scenario, I have an AI that's sending me information, but how does the AI know in my demo that some of the text is supposed to be displayed in the chat pane, some of the other text is supposed to be displayed in the Mermaid section, and by extension generated as an SVG file? This is what we call a structured output. So it's the ability to actually tell my agent that, or my LLM, that when it's sending me information, I don't want it to just send me plain text. I want it to use a different format. And this format is going to be a JSON schema. There's the format, there's the schema. And the cool thing about that is I can just say, by the way, I'm expecting you to send me some text. I'm expecting you to send me a Mermaid syntax and maybe a header that tells me what type of diagram it is. And I will need absolutely all three, text, Mermaid, and syntax, when you send me the message. And the cool thing about that is I don't even have to explain it really to my LLM. It will do a good job at figuring out what to put in what part of the response. And when I get the response, I actually get a JSON structure that I can then parse. And if I tell it be strict, then I know that it will always meet that syntax for me. And that's a great way for me to have, when I get to JSON, I can say, okay, this part goes into the Mermaid diagram, this part goes in the chat window, and this is the type of diagram I'm looking for. So how else would you use AI or to improve your user's experience? Well, one of the examples that I didn't walk through today is if you find a syntax error in my code, my Mermaid, go fix it for me. But the other thing I could say is go generate a title behind the scenes, right? Or go create an accessible description of the diagram so that I can embed it in the page so that we're creating accessible content. But of course, I could use the same approaches, either using RAG or to use a function or an MCP function to go extract content from the page where I'm sitting in SharePoint or from a document library in a site where I'm located. Because let's remember that the functions, when they're being called, the functions are running in the context of the user where the user is located. So if you're in SharePoint and you're running in a web part, you already have kind of access to all this information. All right, so this was a quick overview of how to integrating AI into your web parts, your existing web parts, to improve the user experience. If you want more information, you can go check out the Azure OpenAI Responses API or the OpenAI Responses API. And if you want to play with Mermaid, go take a look. That's it for me.